Good evening. I was here to talk about the comfort zone. Everyone's seen that picture, I'm pretty sure. And I was going to talk about being uncomfortable around about here. I don't think the people on the left can actually see this. There's a spot all the way over there, and that's the very uncomfortable zone, the awful zone, the abyss. That's what I'm going to talk about for a little while this evening. So, to get there, we have to go back to about 2003. I signed up to become a soldier. I joined the Royal Signals. One of the proudest days of my life. Had so much fun. It was really good. And they taught me a lot of things. They taught me to be tough. They taught me to be resilient. All of these things are drilled into you over and over and over. And I found out I was actually quite good at running or just not stopping. But what I also realised was that there's no bloody fun in it. Not in the army. They want you to run from A to B in a set speed at a set time. So I really didn't enjoy it. I actually hated running, which is a little bit uncomfortable when you have to do it all of the time. So 2008 came, I'd been to Afghanistan. That was a bit pants. It wasn't fun at all. But I still used to pride myself on being really, really super fit, despite the fact that this photograph, you can clearly see I'm smoking. I was still pretty fit. So I left the army and got back on the wagon of Civvy Street. And I remember still having that mental attitude of everyone should be able to run, everyone should be super fit. I used to say I was a horrible person with that attitude. And my wife actually gave me a dig the other day and said, "You weren't horrible. You just had a different mindset." And I said, "Yeah, okay." So I took that on the chin. But with that mindset, when I was in Civvy Street, I watched some of my colleagues training every lunchtime. They'd go out and train. They'd go out and run. And I got curious and I said, "What are you training for, lads?" And they went, "Oh, we're doing a half marathon." Do you have to train for that? So I put my money where my mouth was and I went and ran a half marathon, the next one that I could sign up for. I actually set a PB that I've still not beaten today. Just because I had that belligerence, I suppose, to go and get it done. I didn't have any fancy watch or anything like that. It was just go. But during that time, I've kind of visioned this a lot when I went through, we will get to in a little while, I went through counselling what caused this, what caused that and everything. And I still don't 100% understand. But I was gambling a lot. Apparently a lot of ex-squaddies do. But I was hiding it by running because I hate running and I hated myself and it kind of all made sense. I really don't like running. And during this time I was on holiday with my wife. She's out here somewhere hiding. And one of our friends sent me a link to the London Marathon. I was like, "Oh, do I? Don't I? You don't have to train for a London Marathon, do you? Hang on, perhaps." So I ummed and ahed, and I thought I'll decide when I get home. So we got back off our holiday, and I went to sign up, and all the tickets had gone. And I was like, "Oh, well." But then Facebook and social media being the way they are, watching your every move, they sent me a link to sign up for London to Brighton 100k. So I said to the wife, "Do you think I can run 60 miles? I've ran 40 miles when I was in the army. I can do 60 miles, surely." And she went, "Ugh," the way that she does when I come with these crazy ideas. So I went and ran 100k. Again, hiding away from things. It was my way of getting away, I suppose. I still really, really didn't like running. And then eventually everything came falling down. I realised how awful I'd been because I was a pretty awful person. I was an awful husband. I wasn't an especially good dad. I was just Yeah, not a nice person at all, really. And my mental health took a dive, really bad dive. And it got to a point where I very nearly did something stupid. So I rang the Samaritans, and the night that I rang them, the phone rang and rang and rang, and nobody answered. So I was sat in my car thinking, well, this is a bit shit. They haven't answered the phone, not because they don't want to speak to me, but because they're so busy. I could process that. This is because they're so busy. I'm going to be taking up their time from helping those people if I stay on the phone. It's a crazy, crazy way of thinking, I understand, but that's how my mindset was. But I eventually did get through, and they said, you need to go home. You need to speak to your wife. You need to tell her this and tell her that and tell her everything. I said, okay. And I didn't really tell her about the gambling because I'm a bit of an idiot, and it was kind of, that's by the by, it really doesn't matter. But I told about everything else, and I rang the NHS and said that I'd tried to take my life, and they went through a big questionnaire. It's a crazy questionnaire, and they said, "Oh, you're high risk." I was like, "Oh, this sounds good." And then they put me on a 9-month waiting list. Now, I noticed this yesterday when I did a dress rehearsal. Look at that. 9 months. Now, my problem was I'm very, very impulsive, hence going and running a half marathon, hence signing up for the London to Brighton. I get an idea, I do it. They told me to ring 999 if I have the idea. It wasn't going to work. But I carried on gambling. It was an escape. And then my wife found out how bad the gambling had got, and it was awful. And so she said, right, this is either me or the gambling. And I went, right, okay, only one choice. So I rang GamCare, which is a fantastic charity. They help gamblers. And you type in your details, and it blocks all the sites, so you can't go and gamble anymore. It takes away that impulsivity, which is really, really good. But they also offer counselling, so I kind of went in the back door. And I was dreading going into counselling because I thought I was going to have to sit on a chair and say, hi, I'm Graham and I'm addicted to gambling. But I didn't. I went, and it was one-to-one. And we didn't really talk about gambling at all, which really, really blew my mind. We talked about a lot of things, about what drove me to gambling, perhaps, and my life growing up and being a soldier and all of these other things and how gambling draws you in and all the rest. Now, going through that counselling, I was still running, even though I hate it. You'll hear me say that a lot tonight. And I remember on my lunch break, I was actually training for a fight, so I was running to keep myself fit, and because it was always just been a tool. And I pushed myself really hard, and there was sweat and snot and everything. And I ran past the army camp next to where I used to work, and there's this squaddy fresh as a daisy reminding me of my youth, those pictures. And I was like, wow, eureka, this is amazing. This guy's going to look at me now and think, wow, look at that fat civvy, can't keep his arse together. Look at him, he's a mess. And I'm looking at him thinking, wow, I remember being like that. But he didn't know how hard I'd run. He didn't know how far I'd run. And I didn't know how far he was going to go either. And that was my eureka moment, or number one eureka moment. I don't know how far any of you guys have come in life, how hard you've fought, how hard you've had to stay or how hard you've had to fight to stay where you are or to progress. Much the same as you didn't know me until I got up here. And I think that's an important lesson to learn. Whilst I was going through counselling as well, like I say, I was carrying on running. I actually went and ran my first marathon. Despite running 100Ks and stuff, I'd never ran a marathon at all. So I signed up for my first marathon race, and it was awful. I was expecting it to be like the London Marathon, with crowds of people throwing things at me and high fives and big signs and everything else, and it wasn't at all. I think there was one little girl gave me 2 jelly babies, and I was like, wow. That was at about mile 20, and I thought she was a goddess, giving me nectar. It was amazing. So yeah, it wasn't fun. So I remember sitting down with my counsellor and saying, I hate running. I still use it as a tool, and this is just pants. But I raised like nearly £2,000, I think, which was really, really good. So that's the way I looked at it. And I said, but I hate running. And she went, right, so this is Eureka moment number 2. Graham, you can't do something for over 4 hours and hate it. And as you can see in the pictures, boys and girls, I hate running. There's my lovely wife up there. She's down there as well. Big cheesy smiles. She doesn't run as much as me. She doesn't particularly like running for real this time. But I found that it gives me so much joy. And it's allowed me to take a lot of reflections on life. And that's kind of why I'm here today. Running allows me to give analogies to life and just kind of put some things in perspective. And those stories that I find when I'm out on the trails and out in the middle of nowhere, I try and share with other people. So one, I want to share with you quickly because this is one that I think even non-runners understand. And it is a great analogy for life. So it's called a stone in the shoe. I'm sure all of you at one point or another have had that little tiny bit of grit in your shoe. And then eventually, if you leave it there, it feels like a rock. And you take your shoe off and it's a tiny, tiny little bit of grit. But when you're running a race, quite often people don't take the shoe off. They don't want to stop. They carry on. They carry on. So that little tiny bit of grit becomes a hot spot, then becomes a blister, and then potentially stops the race completely. The runner has to stop. Did not finish. Everyone's sad. It's the same with life. Sometimes you'll have that little problem come along that you can't deal with right now or don't want to deal with right now. It might be a bill. It might be just a letter telling you something else. If you deal with it now, much like if I'd have dealt with the little stone in my shoe at the beginning when I felt it and taken 20 seconds to take my trainer off, empty the shoe, put it back on, everyone's good. It's the same with the bills, the little problems. If you can deal with the little problems early, before they become massive, then everybody's good. And what I also realised was that picture that I showed you earlier where I'd been to the abyss, that horrible place. I actually quite enjoy when it's on my terms. That gift I've got of don't quit, of refusing to be beaten, is awful when it comes to gambling, unless you're one of the gambling companies, one of the bookies, they love it. But it's absolutely fantastic for doing crazy distance races because I refuse to quit. And when I go to those dark places, I already have the answers. I've been there. I know what it's like. I don't allow my mind to beat me. In fact, I actually embrace it and say, come on, let's go. But that uncomfortable bit kind of takes us all the way back to here. And I know that humans are humans and we don't like being uncomfortable. So your feelings, sometimes feeling sad is uncomfortable. For some people, feeling happy is uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what it is, it can make you feel uncomfortable. Asking for help can feel uncomfortable. And that's probably one of the most important messages of tonight that I want you to take away. If you take away anything at all, is if you need it, please be uncomfortable. Go and ask for help. And there are plenty of charities about, especially in Merthyr. So be uncomfortable and reach out. Thank you.